Take your seats.
Captain Robert E. Clark II, Commandant of Midshipmen.
Class of 2015, congratulations on tonight. Congratulations on the summer so far, but tonight is a very special evening. It's rare, whether you're in the military, whether you are in civilian life, or whether you are just aimlessly going through the pursuit of someone's education or life, to be able to not only read about history, but to have the opportunity to sit down and talk and interact and come to know the legacy and the history that you are now carrying forward. Sitting over here to my left is you in 50 years. Sitting over here to my left are young men that had dreams, passions, and careers. They are the legacy that we carry on. I had the privilege of talking to them before this ceremony, and quite frankly, I've had the privilege to serve under and get to know a good many of them. They're the reason I decided to wear the cloths of my country. They're the ones that when I go to sleep at night or wake up in the morning, I reflect on how did the class of 65 do that? How did then Captain, and you can fill in the name, how did he approach that problem? Everybody in 2015, stand up right now. And I want you to look down here. I want you to look at the legacy that you will carry on into the future. This is a rare opportunity. Tonight we are amongst heroes. Tonight we are amongst the reason we are. And it's truly humbling and an honor to have a great class of 65 present and pass the torch into the future to the soon, not yet, great class of 2015. Please join me in a round of applause to our heroes. Okay. I want you to say this as loud as you possibly can. We normally are very proud of our class, and rightfully so. But with your legacy, with our heroes sitting here, we owe it to them to show them how proud we are of them and that you're ready to carry that torch forward. On three, I want to hear as loud as you could possibly say 65. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Outstanding. Go ahead and take your seats. That was so loud you gave feedback to the mic. It is my humbling honor to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Admiral Reason is a sailor, is a leader, is a warrior, is a statesman, but he's also a mentor. The careers of more men and women than you have in your class have been affected by this great American. He hails from Washington, not too far away. Mrs. Reason's been by his side throughout his distinguished career. He's commanded at every single level in our military and in civilian life. Coons Bainbridge, Cruiser Destroyer Group 1, Commander Surface Forces Atlantic, and Commander U.S. Atlantic Fleet. But through those command positions, through those ever-increasing levels of leadership, he remained a sailor, a statesman, a warrior, and a mentor. I want to share a personal story with you that kind of reflects the legacy that Admiral Reason has left. I was a young lieutenant, and I was assigned to Cruiser Destroyer Group 8, and then I went on to what used to be USA Command. Now it's Joint Forces Command. And my boss was Admiral Hal Gaiman. And I used to hear all the time from Admiral Gaiman, when we go to this particular meeting, I want you to listen to Admiral Reason. When we go and see this, listen how Admiral Reason approaches this problem. Fast forward a little bit in the future, I went from Cruiser Destroyer Group 8 to USACOM, and my boss then was an Army General, General Mike Steele. And I heard the same thing. And I was brand new to the complex, kind of like you all, Plebe Summer. I didn't know which way was north. I didn't know which way was south. I barely knew where my office was. But quite frankly, that wasn't important, because the office I needed to know is where my boss's office was. And I was having a hard time navigating with that. We had a big meeting that was coming onto the compound, and again, being the baggage carrier, or as the Army likes to call it, the horse holder for my boss, I was off for a recon to find where this meeting place was, and I was off. All of a sudden, I ran into a 3-star. I was frozen. That 3-star was Admiral Reason. He didn't have to stop. He didn't have to take time. I was just this scurrying lieutenant looking for something. He could clearly see that I was lost, and Admiral Reason has those kind of senses. I was beyond lost. He took the time not only to help me find where I needed to go, but he did so I didn't feel insignificant. He did so I felt that I was important, that I had a say. And we talked for about 20 minutes. Asked me where I was from, what submarines I'd served on. I'd mentioned the boss, who was now my boss, gave me some anecdotes about him, and then wished me a nice day and gone. I am confident Admiral Reason does not remember that day. Shipmates, I will never forget that. Never forget that. Today we're going to talk about honor. This is your honor coin ceremony. And that's kind of a bridge. Live your life every single day and set the example that will make you proud, will make your class proud, and will make your legacy proud. Admiral Reason's made a huge impact on my life. 3-star helping a lieutenant. 3-star taking an interest in a lieutenant. A couple weeks later, I was talking lieutenant to lieutenant. A good friend of mine from Nuke School, a guy named Wayne Usloff. And we started, we call JO retention talks, which is a couple junior officers whining about stuff. And I mentioned my previous CO, and he said, I had a great CO. When I was on Bainbridge, this guy was incredible. Captain Reason. I said, that's funny. We have an Admiral Reason. I wonder if they're related. It's the same man. This class is passing the torch to you. The expectations are high. Here's an example of what it means to be a sailor, what it means to be a statesman, and what it means to be a warrior. Class of 15, please join me in welcoming our Admiral, our mentor, our warrior, Admiral Paul Reason.
Well, sometimes I have to pull these microphones down when tall guys speak before me. Don, I could stand here and say, I remember clear as a bell that day when we met and we chatted. But I'd be lying through my teeth, so I won't try. Good evening, class of 15. As your 50-year predecessors, the class of 65 fully appreciates that you will be serving our nation and our Navy and Marine Corps that is far different than those in which we were commissioned. There are new tools to help you perform your duties more efficiently and more effectively. This is true because we spent much of the past 50 years helping improve processes. The processes that make our forces the most capable in the world. And we are truly proud that you can benefit from this hard work, and we expect you to perform a similar role for the class of 2065. That's how our Navy works. That's how we capitalize on the advances in technology and skills. That's how the brigade has remained the key and critical ingredient necessary to maintain the naval strength of the United States since our first midshipmen were sworn in at Fort Severn in 1845. There are but a few outward similarities between you and those first mids. Perhaps the number of buttons on your full dress uniform or some other inane fact. But there persists an inward similarity among all midshipmen, past and present. We are all volunteers who have chosen to spend a portion of our lives gaining the education and training necessary to provide a maritime defense to our homeland, a defense to our people, and a defense to our democracy. This we have sworn to undertake, and a grateful nation believes our oath because of those who have preceded us. Previous grads have served the nation as they promised. Previous grads have successfully protected the nation. And because they did exactly what they swore they were going to do, they are deemed to be women and men of honor. There's the word we're to talk about tonight. I suppose I'm to lecture on honor tonight. I mean, I know what it is, but it's hard to clearly tell you what it is because, you see, you're very young and you haven't had a lot of life's experiences for me to draw on for examples. But let's make a deal. I'll talk about honor for a little while, and then I'll tell you a sea story. Because you see, any time you talk to an old sea dog, 50 years your senior, you should always encourage them to tell a sea story. Because we all, in this little piece of pie right here, there's probably 1,000 sea stories. 3 weeks before I-Day, the National Spelling Bee was held not far from here. They had a wonderful method for imparting knowledge regarding words in the English language, ultimately to determine how to spell them correctly. Suppose the word given to you was honor. Easy to spell until you really start to worry about it a little bit. Seems like it should be easy. So you ask the moderator, is it an American or a British word? Starting to get the idea, huh? He responds, yes. You ask, please use it in a sentence. He says, the Queen conferred the honor of knighthood for his exemplary achievements. You said, Another sentence, please. Your Honor, I was at home with my wife on the night in question. Well, about that spelling bee, we'll talk a little more a little later. In centuries past, honor was dependent upon gender. A woman's honor was a reference to chastity or purity. A man's honor, often keyed to dignity and pride, It might even be the grounds for armed conflict, like a duel, sometimes precipitated on reference to a woman's honor. You must agree with me that none of these uses seems quite right. A popular online dictionary offers 17 different definitions of the word honor. Of these, only one resonates with our discussion here tonight at USNA. Honor, a keen sense of ethical conduct. Integrity, a person of honor. Honor, a keen sense of ethical conduct. Integrity, a person of honor. Tonight helps focus your thoughts and actions in the proper vein to be committed to honor. It is that focus that will give you direction when faced by uncertain situations. Honor is the tool that lets you navigate the unknown from this day forward throughout your life. Now I promised a sea story. Unlike some sea stories, this one is true. Really, it's really true. It was 33 days after my graduation, 30 days after I was wedded in the USNA chapel. I reported to my first ship, USS J.D. Blackwood in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Upon reporting aboard, I was told to take the day off and go help my wife get settled in Philly. We had just arrived in town. But to bring my skivvies with me the next morning because the ship would be going to sea for 2 days. The next morning I came aboard, was assigned a stateroom, and learned where to get a cup of coffee. The 1MC announced, "Ensign Reason, report to the bridge." To get there, I had to climb up a vertical ladder about 15 feet. And once I got to the top of that ladder, I ran into the biggest man I had ever met in my life. I mean, I'm not a small person, but this dude was huge. The captain. So he said, "Good morning, Ensign Reason. What time is it?" I said, "It's 07:45, sir." He said, "I understand you went to the Naval Academy. Is that correct?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Get the ship underway at 0800 and head to sea." Before I could say, "Aye, aye, sir," he was gone. Just disappeared. Well, there I was on this flying bridge where there is really almost nothing. I started to walk around the bridge to see what was there. There was a little bridge wing on the starboard side, and the ship was moored starboard side too. That bridge wing was about the size of this podium. So I sort of inched out there and looked down and could see how we were tied up to the pier. I continued my tour around the bridge, and on the center line there was a voice tube. Maybe you've seen them on the YPs, you know, a piece of brass. You talk into it, your voice goes through a tube and comes out in the space down below. So I looked at the voice tube and I said, "In the pilot house, this is Ensign Reason. I have the deck in the con." And I listened and I heard, "Aye, aye, sir." That works. I continued on around my little tour around this flying bridge, and I went aft. I looked over the port side, and there was another pier on that side. It really seemed to me there wasn't much space between these two piers where the ship was sitting. And I looked down, and I swear that's the longest pier I've ever seen in my life. And at the end of that pier was the Delaware River. and the Delaware River was rushing faster than I'd ever seen any river move. So I said, you know, you can do this. You know, you've been on YPs, training. You can do this. I continued my tour around this little flying bridge, and there was a desk that was maybe about this high, and it had a hood over it. You know, a hood like you'd see someone pulling over a baby carriage or something to keep the rain and, you know, the elements off of the charts. It was a chart table. So as I came around the edge of the chart table, I saw a pair of shoes, a pair of dungarees. Inside of them was a man. And he was leaning across the chart table, sound asleep. And so I said, well, at least I'm not alone up here. So I stuck my head in there and I said, good morning, I'm Ensign Reason. And he just was alarmed. He came out, started stumbling, and he said, yes, sir, I'm QN2 Swenson. Not related to you, Larry. He said, I'm your quartermaster, and I guess I fell asleep. I said, I guess so. I can't imagine why. His eyes were the color of tomatoes. But anyway, I said, Swenson, how long have you been aboard this ship? He said, 4 years. I said, well, wow, I guess you've done just about every underway that the ship has done recently. He said, we don't get underway much, but I've been on the bridge for every one of them. I said, have you ever seen the river running this fast? And he said, nope. That's about as fast as I've ever seen. I said, well, do you have any advice on how we should get out of here? He said, there's only one thing you can do, and it works every time. Once you've taken all the lines, you put the engines back full, and you just run out into that river backwards, but you have to stop before you hit New Jersey, because New Jersey was the other side of the river. I said, okay, thank you very much. And I continued my little walk around, and I looked at my watch. It was 7 minutes to 8. So I walked over to the voice tube, and I said, have main engines been tested? Yes, sir, main engines test set. Very well. Single up all lines. That took a couple of minutes, but while that was going on, I'm standing on the little bridge wing, and I said, you know, everything I was always taught, running YPs and everything else, is whatever you do, go slowly. So if the wind starts to move the ship in a way you don't want it to go, you can counter with rudder or engines. Now, if anything unexpected happens, you can stop the ship easily. And I looked back at that river and the longest pier I'd ever seen in my life, and I said, I guess that's what I have to do, but I'm not sure. What do I do? Well, the report came up. All lines are singled up. I said, stand by to answer all bells. Standing by. At about 1 minute of, I said, take in all lines. When the last line came on deck, the boatswain's mate said, blew the whistle, underway, shift colors, all of that stuff happened. And I stood there by the voice tube, sort of holding it tight. I think my fingerprints are still in that one. And I said, rudder amidships. Rudder is amidships, sir. All engines back, full. All engines back, full. Aye, sir. And I stood there for what seemed like a week. Nothing happened. There was no change in sound. Nothing happened. It was probably more like 10 seconds, but it seemed like a week. Then all of a sudden, I start to get a vibration in the deck. Just a little vibration, you know, like that. I look down because when you're looking at a pier, you can instantly detect any motion of the ship. The ship had not moved, and it was not moving. But I did notice down below the pier, the water was starting to move, sort of from the stern up to the bow. So the screws were starting to turn. And they continued to turn faster, and still that ship had not moved. I looked quickly to make sure all the lines were in. They were. And then the ship started to buck. You know, it just started going up and down, up and down. So it's rattling and bucking, and it was 23 years old at that time, and it rattled a lot. Then all of a sudden, it just imperceptibly started to move astern. First about an inch or two, then it started picking up speed. And I looked down, and the wake was making great big swirls between the ship and the pier. So that kept the ship from brushing the pier. Instead, we were going along the wake. And the ship started going faster and faster. And I'm starting to tighten up on that thing even more. I said, wow, when do I stop? He said, don't hit New Jersey. So we went faster and faster, and then we went shooting out into the Delaware River. And when the bow passed the end of the pier, I said, all engines stop. Well, the most miraculous thing happened. Not only did the ship stop its progress towards New Jersey because the river was starting to move us downstream, but almost like a ballet, it started to twist. Now, when you take your engineering courses, you will understand why it started to twist. I could tell you now, but then you'll go to sleep in that class. So just believe me that the ship twisted and started going downstream, bow first, as if I was perfectly on course. I had done nothing but say, all engines stop. So I leaned over the voice tube and said, steady as you go. That means steer the course we're on right now. And make turns for 5 knots, because I figured we were doing 6. Then, just as quickly as he had disappeared, the captain reappeared. Boom! He's standing right behind me. And he says, well done, Reason. I thought for sure you would come creeping out from between the piers. The fast current would grab the stern, and we would be headed upstream towards Trenton, New Jersey, rather than to sea as I ordered. So, you were to be congratulated. And I said, oh, is this one of those honor moments? I guess it was, because what I said was, Captain, I took the good advice of QM2 Swenson to come out fast. He said, you believe Swenson? I said, yes, sir. He said, well, they taught you more at the Naval Academy than I would have thought. I don't think I would have believed Swenson. Anyway, good job. And that is the end. Now, it's important that when you're being told a sea story, someone says the end. Because, you know, if you don't say that, the sea story continues. And sometimes it can go on for 2 or 3 days at a time. But anyway, that's the end. Oh, about that spelling bee. The student said honor, H-O-N-O-U-R. The moderator said correct in English. The student said H-O-N-O-R. The moderator said correct for Americans. The bottom line is that however you spell it, your honor is your guide for navigating through the choices and decisions that leaders of sailors and Marines are called upon to make every day. Your honor is your compass. It's your GPS through life. The women and men that you lead will want to see that you are a person of honor. They will want to believe that you are a person of honor and that you are honorable. They want to emulate your sense of honor. And they will want to be with you when the going gets tough. I truly believe that each of you is a person of honor and a person of principle. My advice to you, keep it that way. Best wishes to each of you in the class of 15, and thanks for your attention.
Sir, on behalf of the class of 2015 and the leadership of the class of 2012, I know you, when you come and speak, there's a lot of times that the placards or the plaques or whatever's given is a great gesture, but the leadership in this class and the class of 15 in particular wanted to do something a little bit more personal. So this is the newest book, Remembering the Naval Academy, and in the theme tonight, Carrying on the Legacy into the Future, this book is to you from the class of 2015, but in particular signed by those in 15 that are now representing the company that you were in when you were here.
Thank you very much. Truly appreciate that. I will cherish this for the rest of my life. And when you get to be my age, you'll know that by that time, maybe you'll be commanders or something like that. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.